Evidence for evolution. Obviously, in science, evidence is huge, okay? If you just come up with a theory with no evidence, then you're like a flat earther or you think vaccines cause autism, okay? There's no evidence to support either one. That's what everything in science is based on. You gotta have evidence for what you believe, okay? So, 39, okay? This is one of the kind of, what are we on? Third page, fourth page of our packet, okay? There's 7 things. Number 39, the 7 things. Fossil record is one of them. Distribution of the fossils, transitional species, biogeography, anatomy and embryology, biological molecules, and phylogeny. Okay, and we're going to walk through every single one of those ones. Okay, if we need to pause it here so you can get it written down for number 39, go for it. All right, so talk about the fossil record. So fossils are much different from today's organisms, okay? Obviously, we know that, okay? The dinosaurs, we don't just see like T-Rexes walking around, even though that'd be pretty sweet, by the way. Obviously, they've got to be a lot different from today's organisms, okay? Scientists use what's called superposition to tell the relative age of fossils. That's number 40, superposition. Now, this one should be pretty straightforward, okay? So the rock on the top is the youngest, the rock on the bottom is the oldest, okay? Just like we talked about with the strata. And this one should be pretty easy. So number 41, using superposition, mark which rock is the youngest and the oldest. Which one's the youngest? Stuff on top. Okay, that's where we're standing. It's not like the stuff on the bottom is the youngest and we're just clambering around the rock down there. Okay? All right, so youngest stuff, like it says there, the newest rock's there. Oldest rock is down there. All right, so number 42 and 43. Okay, so true and false. The fossils that are in the same strata lived around the same time, and the fossils in the strata above and below lived in different periods. Do you think that's true or false? That is definitely true. Okay. Number 43, true or false? Since the fossils are much different from today's organisms, that means that evolution is impossible. True or false? Definitely false. Okay, that kind of gives more evidence to evolution. If there's things that are much different in the past, things have changed, that's the whole thing of evolution, simply change over time. All right, so fossils lived in the same strata, lived around the same time. Fossils in the strata above and below, very different, like we've just been talking about. Okay, they're much different from the organisms alive today. Okay, this is evolution of a species, or evidence for the evolution of the species. Okay, so you can see up here, you got present the modern toothed whale. So think of this as like the orcas. You know, this is Shamu at SeaWorld. Okay, 10 million, 20 million, 30, blah, blah, blah. You get to 60 million years. Okay, we get this dude. He walked on land. And we'll talk about how we got evidence of how whales walked on land. Okay? Now, since evolution is a slow process, they're what's called transitional species. Okay? This is number 44. Okay? These are the organisms that are between one organism and the current organism alive today. Now, in the picture I just showed you, now we're kind of on the opposite side. Okay? We got the baleen whales down here. We got the dude that walked on land over here. The transitional guys are 1, 2, 3. Those are the guys kind of in the middle. Like there's the first guy, or kind of like think of them as like the quote unquote original, even though he's not. Okay, he's the original. Now we got the organism from today. The transitional guys are the dudes in the middle. Okay, add another 10 million years. This guy, he'll be one of the transitional species as well, I'm sure. Okay, as species continue to evolve. Now this guy right here, this is the actual skeleton of this right here. Okay. He's about the size of a Great Dane is what he is. Okay? Now, what this is, baleen, a balena, a baleen whale, like think of a humpback whale, this stuff right here, and I'm kind of make the cursor go away so that way that bottom thing goes away. That stuff there is basically what's called baleen. It's like a filter. So the baleen whales come up from below. They take a big, huge, massive gulp of water and just hold it in their mouth. And then basically they use their tongue to push the water out through the baleen or through the filter. And then all the krill that's still left in there, that's what they eat. That's a baleen whale. So the biggest animals in the world, they used to walk on land. Okay, one of the reasons we talk about that right there, that's a hip joint. Okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. But it's pointless for something that swims constantly to have a hip joint. That's literally just like hanging out in the middle of some blubber and muscle. It's not connected to anything. Okay? Next, guys. Now we're talking about biogeography. This is 45. So what is it? It's a study of locations of organisms around the world. And as the name implies, bio means life. Geography is the locations around the world. So study of the locations of organisms or life around the world. Biogeography. Okay? This is important, number 46, because species from many different parts of the world share similarities. And we talked about this in the very, very first video with the tortoises. Okay, the tortoises and the finches, like we were talking about, the examples. Okay, these are the tortoises. Okay, you can see they all look kind of similar, but they obviously have their differences. Like, look at how long his neck is, kind of a medium-sized neck, no neck. Okay, look at how far he can pick his shell off the water, or off the ground. He can kind of do it. These big tortoises, they more just kind of drag it along. Okay, look at the shell, different shape, but kind of similar, you know, different colorations. So small differences, but they also look the same. Okay, think of the giant armadillos and the anteaters. Okay, generally they all kind of look the same, but they got their differences. Like think up in America here, the giant armadillo. Okay, no joke, some of these shells are bulletproof because of the types of predators that we have in North America. Okay, go down to South America. They don't have like the big jawed predators like North America has, so they don't have the shell, or not the shell, the armor. Okay, go over to the giant pangolin in Africa. Now these are more like scales than fur because it's so hot there. They basically got to keep away for them to keep cool off. Now the spiny anteater, Oceania is kind of a way to kind of talk about all of this down here. New Zealand, Australia, the Philippines, all the different islands down there. That's Oceania. So the spiny anteater, he doesn't really have any like defense like that where he can't like roll up into a ball. Basically, if anything comes near him, he's going to take his tail with all those spikes and whack him. Because if you didn't know, basically everything down in Australia and Oceania down there, everything is really cool looking, but everything's kind of wanting to kill you and it's all poisonous. So again, they look similar, but they have some very significant differences at the same time. This is the biogeography that Darwin noticed. All right, now moving on to anatomy and embryology. Okay, now descent with modification, again, we talked about this a while ago. This is Darwin's phrase, predicts that animals will have similar anatomy. Now that's 47. Now 48, okay, this is talking about how the anatomy has been adapted for different uses though. Now 48 is a homologous structure. Now this is an anatomical structure that occur in different species but are from the same ancestor. We learned this was homozygous. Homo means same ancestor. Okay, they occur in different species, same ancestor though. That's the important part, is the ancestors. Okay, for example, this right here, this is a homologous structure. Okay, it's simply been adapted to different use. So you can see this is the humans right there. That's a humerus. There's a humerus right there. It's been adapted a little bit for the cat's leg. There's the humerus portion right there for the whale's fin or for the bat's wing. Okay, common ancestor, way back in the day, but it's just simply been used for different uses. Okay, now on the other side, analogous structures, these are anatomical structures that have similar functions, but do not come from a common ancestor. Okay, now the analogous structures, this is 49. What types of structures do not come from a common ancestor? Analogous structures. And you can see right here, like wings. You can see like a butterfly, I think that's pterodactyl, eagle, bat. They're all analogous. Similar function, they're all helping them fly, but they're not related to each other at all. So again, homologous structure, same ancestor, different function. Analogous structure, similar function, different ancestor. Those two are really important, okay? Those are your vocab words. Those will be on some projects that you guys need to use those on some projects. Okay, so again, there they are right next to each other. Common ancestor, homologous structure. Analogous structure, not a common ancestor. All right, now number 50, a vestigial structure. So this is an anatomical structure that serves no purpose in one organism, but resembles structures in similar organisms, like we talked about earlier. Okay, the femur and the pelvis, this is the hip joint. So for a whale that swims, he doesn't need a femur or a pelvis or a hip at any point. Okay, he swims. Like I was talking about, it's just hanging out in a layer of blubber and muscle is all it is. Okay, so it's a vestigial structure. It doesn't need it. It serves no purpose for that whale, but it resembles structures in similar organisms, or those transitional species we were talking about. Okay, so again, homologous structure, analogous structure, vestigial structure, and you'll need to know those. Okay, another vestigial structure that people could talk about, okay, serves no purpose in one organism, is like the human spleen. Like I know a bunch of people that gotten their spleens taken out. You know, their diet doesn't have to change. They don't have to be on different medicines or anything like that. It's just kind of simply an extra organism for whatever reason. We should still have it. Okay, next one, embryology. Okay, this is when similar stages of embryo development are in different species. Okay, low G, like in biology, is the study of. So this is the study of embryos. Okay, so you can see the fish, salamander, turtles, and humans. Okay, we're studying how they develop as embryos. Okay, now in the beginning, look at like kind of stage 1 between all 4 of them. They look pretty similar. But as they start to grow, you know, the fish is going to look less like a human and more like a salamander. This is what they're studying. Based on how they develop, they can try and figure out how related to each other things are. So animals that share more phenotypic or physical similarities should also show more genetic similarities. So you can see all the different types of ape as well as human. Okay, we share some similarities physically, therefore our genes are very similar as well. Okay, we are actually 98% the same DNA with these guys. We share that percentage. That's 54. What percent of their DNA do chimps and humans share? 98%. Okay, we're really, really close to those guys. Okay, now, the relationships by ancestry among groups of organisms. Okay, so this is phylogeny. Okay, actually, now that I think about it, go to 55. What molecules are examined to determine similarities? DNA and proteins. DNA and proteins. All right, so phylogeny, getting back to this, I apologize. Phylogeny, the relationships by ancestry among groups of organisms. So now in order to group them, they use a lot of different types of evidence. Now the use of different types of evidence, this is number 56, okay, also presents problems since different evidence supports different relationships. That's kind of the problem typically in science, is that we're all kind of generally in the same area, but those real tiny details, different evidence supports. Now we're talking tiny details, as in like, you know, the earth is still round. They're just trying to figure out little tiny details on the exact speed of, you know, how fastly we're moving around the sun, or the whole universe is moving around, how Milky Way, and like those smaller details that way. We all agree that the world is flat. We all agree that the moon is orbiting us. You know, basic stuff like that. It's the smaller details that we kind of are disagreeing over. Okay, now this is a phylogenetic tree here. Okay, so we talked about the baleen whales. That's what they're talking about right there. So these guys, based on some evidence, they put right whales, gray whales, rorquals all next to each other. Okay, then they put the Amazon river dolphin more closely related to these guys than to this guy. But get a little bit of different evidence, and maybe the Amazon river dolphin is more closely related to that guy than those guys. That's what they're talking about with the disagreements. Okay, now evolution in action. So the Caribbean anole lizards, they're a perfect example of this evolution in action. So they live in Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico, kind of all down in the Caribbean. Okay, you can see a picture of the dude right there. So there are 6 different types of the lizard. They live on tree trunks, they live on twigs, and they also live on the grasslands. Do you guys see them there? If you didn't, he's right there. You can see his head that way, and his tail right there. Okay. Now, they got different adaptations for their different environments on each different island. So the tree trunks, those guys, they got the stocky body. You can see right there, kind of stocky body. Okay. They also got long legs. The twigs, they got thin bodies and short legs. So that way they can blend into their environment. Then the grasslands, like we saw, they're real slender, real long tails. Their coloration is also very, very similar to the grass color. Okay, now there is a distinct species of tree-dwelling lizards on each island. Okay, now there's the guy from Cuba, there's the guy from Jamaica. You know, you can see they're a little bit of different color, but generally you can see they got the long back legs, stuff like that. They're real close, but they're also real similar from each other. Okay, now the possible hypothesis on why they look the way that they look, but also why the reasons that they look different. Okay. Either there's an ancestral twig-dwelling species, they lived on one island, and then they later migrated to the other islands. Or they're completely independent of one another. They've never met each other, they never knew about each other, nothing. Okay, they're completely unrelated to each other. So, which one do you think it is? I'm actually not going to tell you. Okay, you're actually going to do an activity about this whole thing I set up, so I'm not going to spoil it for you. Sorry about that. All right, now convergent evolution. Okay, there's two different types. They're convergent and divergent. Okay, now the convergent evolution, this is the process by which different species evolve similar traits, or they're not related to each other, but they start to look similar. Okay, this occurs because the species are exposed to the same environmental factors. So let's say that the same type of grass is on multiple islands. So they all start to have camouflage that looks like that type of grass. Or the temperature is all the same kind of everywhere, so they all develop some sort of fur or blubber layer to keep them warm. Okay, same environmental factors. Okay, the species become more and more similar, or they converge. Or think of it like kind of like a big V. They start out top, way up out here, and they're getting closer and closer together to each other. Okay. So what environmental factor were the lizards exposed to? They probably had the same predators. There's probably the same food availability. That's also the ease of reproduction. Those are the environmental factors that all of them were exposed to. Now, on the divergent evolution standpoint, this is where a process of descendants changing to fit into different parts of the environment, or basically one, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, then they all start to change so they can fit into different parts of the environment. So species become less similar, or they become more and more different from each other. This is the finches. You know, think of like the great-granddaddy right there of all the finches. Now he's got a whole bunch of different types of finches. They're becoming more and more different from each other. That's divergent evolution. Okay? So in convergent evolution, the process by which species evolve similar traits, they converge. This is number 63. So in convergent evolution, species converge. And in divergent evolution, they're going to diverge or become more different from one another. Okay? Now, adaptive radiation. This is number 65. This is when a population, they go through enough of that divergent or different, becoming different evolution until it fits many parts of the environment. Going back to the finches. Okay, you can see originally, let's say that they all ate seeds. Okay, then that one really weird finch started eating the cactus. Okay, and then a few more generations goes by, and that other weird dude started eating the insects, and he started eating, and he thought it was good for him. You know, we always have that one weird friend that'll do that stuff. Okay, this is divergent evolution, and if it goes through enough of it, then it becomes what's titled adaptive radiation, where basically they fit almost every part of the environment that's out there. Okay, now coevolution, we actually talked about this kind of briefly. Okay, this is when two species evolve based on each other's influence. This is number 66 and 67. Okay, we talked about this earlier. The cheetah is getting faster to catch the gazelle. The gazelle has to get faster to escape the cheetah. So they are evolving because of each other. Because if the cheetah didn't need to run fast to catch him, there's no point in him being fast. So he is becoming faster, getting more and more and more faster as the generations move on, because the gazelles are getting faster and faster and faster. Okay, they evolve because of each other, like we talked about with the bacteria and the antibiotics. You know, there's a new a new flu virus every year, and we also develop a new flu vaccine every year. That's coevolution. Okay. All right, so next one. This is talking about speciation. That'll be the last lecture in this series, okay?